After building a consensus on India's most ambitious tax reform, the goods and services tax, the GST that is, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley says he is open to reviewing rates if a potent case is made for it. In this Mega 18 Hour exclusive, Jaitley also asserts that the telecom regulator and the ministry need to step in and not preside over the death of one of India's most successful sectors.
I think there is a great amount of political maturity which has come into Indian politics. And you may have some aberrations, but by and large, what's the pattern? Reforms are debated. There are doubts people have. But once there is a larger debate and a consensus, then they get approved by almost a unanimity. Now, GST has been a case where after a debate, we didn't want to rush through just by a vote. And we've almost unanimously been able to arrive at almost every decision. Now, you require a consensus. You require, you're dealing with the federal finances. And therefore, if you say that I am completely going to ignore the interest of one or two states, federal consensus is not arrived at by that. You may have to have consensus, compromises.
I think you've been asked on the GST since the day you swore into office, and it is almost considered to be a panacea for growth, as if it is going to solve all ills. Is that over-expectation bothering you?
Well, I don't think the over-expectation is bothering me. I think we had a very, very complicated indirect tax structure. In the field of indirect taxes, it completely changes the rules of the game. India becomes one entity. You get the input credits. Right. You don't pay tax on tax. There is a free flow of goods and services across the country. Most of the assessees will never get in their life to see the assessing officer. And I think it will add to the ease of business. And a more efficient tax will give you better collections in the long run to the states and the centre, and therefore more revenues to spend on development, and hence its impact on the GDP.
Indeed. I think the Kerala finance minister has worked out some numbers, and he says that the hit on the central's and the state's revenues will be about to the tune of 1 lakh crore rupees. Have you done a back of the envelope calculations just yet?
We have done. Of course, if you take all the rates together, they are lesser than the present lot. Now, if you speak to some industries, they won't expect it, because I think some self-serving arguments in many cases are being given. But if you take the overall picture, taxes have come down.
That's right. Yeah.
So if government was getting X, it is today going to get less than X. But then that's the object of the GST. A more efficient system, a wider tax base, there would be a larger buoyancy as far as the tax collection is concerned. And therefore, if you see the future roadmap for a GST, as I imagine, you may from multiple rates come down to lesser rates, lesser brackets or slabs. And you may even have to cut down some rates if the base increases.
Indeed. I think your revenue secretary in Bangalore a few days back said that there is scope for rationalization of rates of some goods and services. You say there are, and you're right, there are very self-serving arguments that are coming in from almost all industries. Are you willing to review some of these in your June 11th?
You see, we are several governments which sit together.
That's right.
32 states and union territories, one Union of India. And therefore, you have to be answerable to the people. If some group represents, we'll consider it. Now, consideration will not be on the grounds of populism. Consideration is not going to be on the ground that some celebrity has come and endorsed a tax cut. It won't be on a ground that some industries being...
celebrities say they'll go out of business.
You're being shrill over something or the other. But we will see. Our object is take the existing rates, take the weighted all India average, not the average of one state or the other. Take the weighted all India average and fit the people in the bracket closest to it. Now, if we find that there is some deviation from this, or there's a calculation error, we can look at it. But I don't see a large number of commodities coming into this category.
But why is July 1st so sacrosanct? And are you at all open? Because, you know, finance ministers like from West Bengal have said it is not going to be possible to...
Well, there has to be a cogent reason. The rules have broadly been framed. The rates have been fixed up. In the budget, you announce the rates one day and they are applicable immediately thereafter. So you've announced the rates well in advance. You've been telling people to come and register themselves. The GSTN has made a presentation. The IT backbone is ready. Now, therefore, I do see that in the first 1 or 2 months, there will be some teething issues. And we want, irrespective of when you start, those teething issues are going to be there. Because people are switching over from one system to another. And we want to be over with those teething problems and go on to the smooth functioning. The earlier we do it, the better.
Some of us were very surprised that you finally managed to arrive at a consensus on gold because state finance ministers were speaking completely different languages. Having done that, you've created a new slab of sorts, 3%.
You see, gold, even if it had remained at 2%, would have been a separate slab.
Exactly, yes.
It is neither 0 nor 5.
That's right, yes.
Now, the argument in favor of 5 was, it's a luxury good and fit them into an existing slab. Even when there was a vertical division,
you could arrive at a consensus.
We had to then go for a middle path. The middle path could either be 3 or 4.
But do you fear there'll be some other industries who would want to be in the 3%?
We are not. We don't intend bringing other industries into this.
Are you a little disappointed that states like West Bengal are saying it will not be easy or it will not be possible for us to adhere to the GST? Can the GST roll out without one state?
I don't think any state would eventually keep itself out of GST. I do believe that all states are responsible. A state may sound a word of caution today, but eventually if the GST does roll out on the 1st of July, every state will have to do it. Most states have already passed the SGST law.
That's right.
The reason behind this is everybody wants to be a part of the All India goods and services mechanism. It's only then that you will get the input credit. Now, if some state remains out,
you're not going to get the input credit.
You are not going to get the input credit and therefore your consumers are going to pay more. And in any case, after the 15th of September, you will lose your right to tax.
Unconstitutionally. You know, I think GST was this one big tick in the box that had to be done. That's been done. What is now going to occupy all your attention?
Well, I think there are challenges as far as the economy are concerned. Always keep increasing and multiplying. There is never a finishing line as far as economic policy or reforms are concerned. Now, we have 2 major issues, both connected to each other, which is the banks and the private sector investment. They are both interconnected. And I think that's an area which we immediately need to address.
What do you believe will be the drivers of growth in 2017? Will it continue to be the public sector engine of growth? And because the real deal is that private sector investment is not
I think you are driving on 2 very powerful engines. You are driving on the engine of public investment.
That's right.
You are driving on the engine of foreign direct investment. For 2 years in a row, we've been the highest recipients. I see infrastructure, I see investment in rural areas as very important. And as the third important engine is the consumption is going to pick up. And once the consumption starts picking up, we will then see the idle capacities in the private sector getting utilized. And that's when we are also simultaneously trying to address the NPA issue as far as the banks are concerned, so that the ability of the banks to support the growth process also increases.
What the market is a little worried about is that is the bank NPA beyond resolution right now? What gives you the confidence
it's not beyond resolution. A, the problem is not so widespread.
Okay.
Bulk of the problem is confined to a certain accounts, 30, 40, 50 accounts. So we've now expanded on the oversight committee experiment. Then the RBI has the overall power. They've already started making a list of certain set of companies. And once you go cracking on the first 5 or 7 companies, and what is it that you are going to do? You are going to use the mechanism under your insolvency law, and you say that either you pay up, or you take a partner if that's needed, or you exit in favor of somebody. And there are people with hordes of money, there are funds with hordes of money, there are people who want to come in. Once somebody can't run, he can't make the whole asset non-performing.
That's right.
He can't allow it to rust. Then somebody else who has the money and resource and can run it should come in. And if the first 5 or 7 cases go that way, I think the present status quo, okay, I don't pay up, what can you do to me?
That's going to be done away with.
That attitude, I think, is the one which needs to be cracked.
We did see RCOM almost on the verge of a default. I don't want to talk about a specific case. They've of course got a lifeline now for the next 7 months. Will you be able to make, will you be willing to make special provisions for a sector like that? Instance, in point is allow spectrum to be a collateral. I mean, there's some amount
I think the telecom department and the regulator I'm sure will look at all proposals. Because telecom in India over the last 2 decades has been a huge success story.
That's right.
And you don't allow success stories to create a problem. And therefore it's a mechanism where you have a minister, a ministry running it. You have a regulator which is managing it. And therefore it's the job of the regulator and the ministry to make sure that competition continues to exist. It's a fair competition. And you don't have all balance sheets of players in the sector going into the red and eventually translating into a problem for the banking system it is. That's something which is absolutely not acceptable. And I think both the Department of Telecommunication and the regulators therefore must rise to the occasion, and they can't preside over a successful sector sliding down.
I appreciate your concerns even on something like competition, but is telecom witnessing hyper-competitive streak that needs to go away?
I can understand good competition. When you have a big new player who enters and he gives you a rate, it becomes a consumer-friendly environment because then everybody has to pull down the rates. And that's what seems to have happened. But then what is the extent to which
you can offer that rate or free rate?
After all, the whole concept of predatory pricing is something that is per se anti-competitive. If you acquire a dominant position and then are anti-competitive, and therefore I'm sure the concerned sectoral or the general regulators will look into these issues.
Is that also bothering you because that has an obvious implication on your own revenues being hit?
You see, revenues is an important concern, but if you have a healthy sector, the revenues in the long term are going to come.
That's right.
Just for the cause of my 1 year revenue, I can't allow a sector to slide down.
Is it worrying you at all, the kind of layoffs, forget about job creation right now, the layoffs that one is seeing in IT?
Well,
because this has a debt on
when you have technologies changing and when you have disruptions because of newer technologies or for some other economic factor, you will see in one sector a job loss. But then when jobs are lost here, they are created elsewhere. I think there is a flawed argument. Jobs don't grow outside the economy. So if you continue to grow at about 7.5–8% in the economy,
that will be the case.
In the formal sector, jobs will be created. And I'm sure there are a lot of jobs being created in the informal sector.
Given the job crunch, are you more open to now reviewing labour sector reforms, for instance, allowing corporates to at least hire
I think
contract labour?
I think this is an argument one has to very carefully weigh. Carefully weigh in the sense that it's very easy to say it in the course of a meeting or an interview or a seminar that all right, you've done all these reforms, what about labour sector? Now labour and land are two very delicate areas. You embark upon those reforms which are possible. So we've been trying to reform the labour laws, ease in the procedures. But which are the reforms in this country which are being held up because of labour? Now I can see 1 or 2 sectors where there is a problem because there is still a public sector monopoly. The railways has it.
Exactly.
In some states, the state transport buses have it. But I think by and large, Indian labour movement is a very responsible movement.
You know, you once in an interview had said to me that privatization is not a bad word, and even in the Vajpayee government it happened. It's not a dirty word. I still remember that comment that you had made. Are you willing to privatize Air India just yet?
Well, I've already said so, and I've given a good reason why it should be privatized. You see, if you are going to spend a huge amount, the public debt itself is 50 to 55,000 crores. Now, is this money to be spent on healthcare? Is this money to be spent on irrigation? Is this money to be spent on education?
Or running an ailing airline?
Or running an airline, particularly when your experiment of bringing private sector into your airports and into your airlines is highly successful, and therefore you already have in the domestic sector 86% of your passengers are flying in aircrafts which are run by private airlines. So whether it's 86 or 100, it doesn't make a difference. Air India can continue to be a national carrier and its management somebody else pays for.
So I'm going to ask you a very frank question. Are you going to find takers for Air India with debt levels of nearly 60,000 crores?
Well, I think the debt levels will have to be matched because a part of the debt level is also in the aircrafts that it owns. Air India also owns a large number of very valuable properties. And then that can bring down the debt levels itself. And then it has some very powerful connections and roots which it has. And therefore, if you take over, if you do a due diligence and see its potential globally, I think the government, of course, will have to also step in and take a part of the share. But I think the whole amount of 55,000-60,000 crores which is being mentioned then substantially comes down.
So you're at least not dilly-dallying or skirting the issue some of your other
You see,
colleagues
given a choice, I would personally go with what the Niti Aayog has said.
which is to sell it completely.
To sell it completely.
Do you think you can arrive at a consensus on that?